Hi Harry, how are you?
No, mate, you're right. Not bad,
Yeah, good,
thanks.
thanks. Happy days.
Good, joining me from outer space.
Generally, it's just a Zoom thing. Just everyone's comments on it. It's quite weird, but it's all good. It's all good. We're definitely not doing anything unique.
Yeah, fair play, mate.
It's all good
Whereabouts are
though.
you based?
I'm in a town called Blackwater, which is about 20 minutes from Guildford. So
Okay.
yeah, whereabouts are you?
That reminds me of Red Dead Redemption, I think.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was in Blackwater, wasn't it? The first one,
Yeah,
or
so
at
I
least it's
don't.
from that.
Yeah, I just watched a bloke playing it on Twitch. I remember
Yeah,
he made a song about it at one point. Um, yeah, I'm up in Manchester.
that's good. Lovely town.
Yeah,
There's some
yeah.
good time. Well, yeah, there's some really good nights there and stuff. Bit of a shame about what was it? Ali's kebab shop closed down, so a bit disappointed about that a few years back. But
Okay.
other than that, yeah, it's good. It's a good place.
Yeah, yeah. All right, mate. Well, cheers for jumping on.
That's all right.
It's quite good for me because like 5 years into the pod now, and bit of a different
Yeah.
vibe with your band, really. So it'd be interesting to hear like the difference in stories type thing. But can you give us a bit of an idea of how you went from starting the band to getting that record deal kind of thing?
I think we only gave out one demo CD to one person. We did this show with a band. I can't remember what they were called. I think they were called Sun Factor. I think, and their bass player was away on holiday, and their standing bass player was a guy called Simon Young, who was a journalist at Kerrang magazine. And I think we gave him the CD of our demo, 4 tracks or something, and I think he really liked it. And then he gave that to Phil Alexander, who was the editor of Kerrang at the time. And then he took it on to, I think it was Marianne Hobbs at the time doing the rock show. And it was kind of his like record band of the week type thing. And we'd already done a few shows and that kind of thing, but nothing really serious. But it was then that it sort of started to get a little bit cool. We had this band before 100 Reasons called Floor, and we did have a review in Kerrang magazine when we did a show supporting Earth Tone 9 back in the day. I don't think they reviewed Earth Tone 9 because they'd already done enough reviews of Earth Tone 9, but we got like 4Ks and that kind of thing. So yeah, kind of all led from there, really. Just giving out one demo to somebody who really liked it.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess
Yeah.
yeah, for the bands that I usually talk to, like NME would be kind of the go-to. But I guess for you guys, is it more Kerrang that you were more enamored with type thing?
I think well, NME was still really good. We had like a definitely had a front cover with NME at one point. I think we were doing some tour around Scandinavia or something, and they were around for a little bit of that. But yeah, I think they were quite supportive. We were definitely sort of more of a Kerrang band, absolutely at the time. But NME, I think, were quite yeah, they were good. They were putting us in, giving us space and stuff back in the day, if I remember correctly. It's all a long time ago now, Harry, as I'm sure you understand.
Yeah, fair play, mate. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I saw the cover. I mean, that's it, especially at that time when kind of like there's this big boom around indie after the Strokes had taken off and stuff. Must have been quite happy to get on the front cover.
Yeah, I mean, just anything like that was really cool. It's just something that when you're starting out in a band, I don't think you ever really see those things or imagining yourself doing those things because you sort of read those magazines. Definitely Kerrang, you sort of read it every week. When you're a kid growing up, just looking for the Faith No More articles and Guns N' Roses and things like that, which is what I was into back then. And yeah, you never sort of expected to actually be on it. I think it was more for me when we were playing shows at places like the Astoria well, I'd been to see so many cool bands in London sort of back in the day. I think that was the stuff that kind of, without sounding derogatory to the magazines, that's kind of what meant more because you'd be
Yeah,
out seeing bands all the time back then. And, you'd be like, oh, well, I saw this band here and now I'm playing it. And, it was amazing. So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And I'm right in thinking, is it three? Is it three EPs you did called? They're called EP one. Was it Ep one, two, and three?
it was just EP one, two, and three. And we kind of carried it on. So we did our first EP, which I think was Cerebra, and that was on Fierce Panda. So Simon Williams kind of took the plunge for our very first release. And then when we signed to Columbia afterwards, they kind of liked the idea of carrying it on. So then we did EP2 with Remus, I think. And then we did I'll Find You, I think was called EP3 or something like that. I can't remember, something like that. But yeah, it was just like it was like a theme thing. It was quite cool. So yeah, it just weren't really we weren't sort of, like I say, we weren't sort of trying to be super big flash rock stars and try and be all meaningful and all that kind of thing. It was just, yeah, let's do that. And we're quite like, apart from music and a lot of other areas, we're fairly easy to please. I'm kind of one of those people, whereas if I don't hate it, then I'm probably all right, rather than having to necessarily love something. I kind of just have to not hate it. It's like when you come up with a band name, you're like, would you like the band name? Do you love the band name? It's like, it works. I'm all right. I'm fine. I don't hate it. So yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah, fair enough. And we've got a question from Jamie on Twitter regarding the EPs. He just says, "Do they still have a copy of EP3? I do. Some song I'll find you."
I've still got the test pressing for Cerebra up in my loft though, which is well looked after,
Okay.
which is quite cool because that was on vinyl. That was pretty cool.
Yes. And yeah, just interested in like the songwriting element. Was that quite a democratic thing?
Yes, actually, we were very much about sort of, if the majority liked an idea more than others, then that's kind of what happened. It doesn't mean we still didn't argue or fight our corner, um, but we were very much about, well, if other people think it's a good idea in the band, then there's a chance that you may as well just go with it and not worry about it. I think there's only a few times where if you sort of have your conversations where you go, I'm really sorry, I genuinely hate this, or something like that, then there's definitely issues there that can be had. Um, but other than that, if it's just like, well, okay, if it's just a slight difference of opinion, most people are kind of fine, and it wasn't sort of a big deal. Um, so yeah, I mean, for me, when I'm sort of writing, I'm quite a good arranger. Obviously, I write a lot of the vocal melodies and the lyrics and things like that. But from like a guitar standpoint, the guitar players would sort of bring ideas, but then Andy Buse and Andy Gilmore would always bring song ideas and stuff as well. So everyone was creative. Everybody had like meaningful input into the songwriting process. Um, but I think the one thing we sort of were quite good at is not being overly precious for things either, because how a song starts when you're writing it and then how it ends up can be completely different. So so that's probably why we're a bit more of a democracy, because we weren't too much into the idea of getting too attached to stuff. We would sometimes, but generally, like, well, yeah, it either works or it doesn't.
Yeah, and like how was there a typical way that songs would come together, or the idea for a song would come together, or was it different ways type of thing?
Just different ways. I mean, when we wrote the last record, we'd have Larry and I sort of in his studio writing. The Andy would come down sometimes and write as well, or Andy Buse or the Andy would send ideas like remotely. They just do a little bit of recording at home, very basic, and then send ideas over. And then Larry and I would work on them, or would come up with our own stuff. Um, and it's probably the first time I've ever sort of worked that way, because technology was around to actually do that. But years ago, we just be in a room all day, every day. And sometimes something cool happens, and sometimes it didn't. And sometimes people brought stuff to the room, and other times it was just see what the vibe's like today, or whatever, or how about this. So I think the one thing that we tried to make sure was just whatever we were doing was never sort of forced, and if it ever felt forced, then it wasn't really something that we would be very good at sort of latching onto. Everything that we wrote was sort of a very natural thing. I think the only time it felt a little bit forced was when we were writing our fourth record, and I think that came across that way as well. It wasn't a sort of very um yeah, just like a natural creative process. We're very good at, I always say, like, the best songs generally write themselves, because you're just vibing and it's just really cool and there's an energy in the room and it's great. Whereas, like I say, if you're just trying to do it and you're sitting there and going, must come up with an idea, then those things generally don't end up too well.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess it's fair to say that your influences will probably be different to a lot of the bands that I speak to. Like, who were the main bands you looked up to at the point you started the band?
Um, I mean, I just listen to music. I like really heavy bands actually, but I also like pop, and I don't. I think the thing for me when I'm writing is I don't really worry too much about what I'm writing or what I'm influenced by. I mean, Mike Patton probably is the biggest influence on me, in terms of sort of singing. And that's not really because I was trying to copy Mike Patton, but just the way that he went about using his voice was something that taught me quite a lot about tone and sounds rather than always worrying about like notation and things like that. Which is obviously a concern too, because you should. But generally, it was more to do with how do I get this to sound good? How do I make something that's a little bit different? But we just wrote what we liked, and if it ended up being heavy, yes. And we've done quite a few songs that can sometimes be a little bit sort of indie, in terms of what they are, and it's never like a conscious thing. It's just we like this song that we're writing right now, we like, and we don't worry about what it is. We let other people worry about that. Someone else is going to stick you in a category quite happily, and you might think you're one thing, and then they'll be like, "Well, actually, no, we think you're this," and you go, "Oh, all right." Just we didn't get. We always used to say we're just in a rock band, but we didn't try to get too hung up on anything other than that, because when you think about rock music, it's incredibly diverse anyway. So, just kind of kind of how we thought about things.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, like, if you felt part of a scene kind of thing. Was there like a scene
I
around
think
the
there was,
bands like that?
yeah, there was a scene, like definitely, bands like definitely sort of Vex, Red, and Ruben that we all sort of played locally around the area, that we were all lived in, and then there was a bunch of other bands as well around. And it was sort of quite, for the most part, there was no real sort of competition. People were just kind of doing their own thing, and no one was really trying to be, something that they weren't. I don't think anything artificial was going on. It was just good people in decent bands that were just having fun playing shows. And, we played a lot together, when we were kind of doing our formative shows and that kind of thing, which was great. So yeah, it was quite nice. You go and see each other's band and wish each other, and then Bexray got signed. I think Ruben got signed. So we got signed. So everybody had their own sort of little journey, which was quite cool. And sort of in the area, it wasn't like a whole Seattle scene or anything like that, obviously, but it was just quite cool, sort of being around creative people all the time. And I used to live with Bex Red many years ago, and we all sort of shared a house together, and that was really cool and really nice. They're lovely guys. So yeah, there was no competition. It was just a nice, healthy scene. And local promoters around at the time, like Barney Jeevans, who sort of managed Reba, just like one of the nicest human beings you could ever know, but always putting on shows, um, in and around the area, and kind of offering those shows to us, and supporting us and things like that. So it was a good time. It's a good time to be around doing that.
Yeah, was it quite London centric at that point, or not really?
No, we never made a fuss of going to London. I mean, we're only about an hour away, but we never played a show in London until we played the Garage supporting a band called Kitty. Um, and they were lovely. They were absolutely wonderful, really kind to us. Um, and yeah, we did our show there in front of about maybe 600 or 700 people, like supporting for our first London show. Whereas other bands locally were kind of sell tickets to their friends and then hire a minibus and go to London to play to those people. Um, so we never really went down that road. We never really thought about that or could be bothered to organise anything like that. We just kind of thought, well, we're just doing what we're doing, and we had opportunities. We kind of went out of London. We went and played shows at the Exeter Cavern and stuff where Pippa and Dave are amazing and giving us shows, and we supported bands like Stamping Ground and, like I said earlier, like Earth Tone 9 and things like that. And we kind of went away from it. And then when it was time to go to London, it was the right time rather than being focused on, we've got my friend Ruben Gotto used to play in a band in Norwich. So we go to Norwich to play shows at places like Fat Paulies and stuff and these cool venues and whatever. So London was just not on our list of things to do. And it wasn't like a conscious thing. We are just like, we're not playing London yet. We haven't played London yet. We just hadn't. It wasn't like, oh no, we haven't played London. It's just like, oh, we haven't played London.
Yeah, yeah. When you say you were in Arroway, whereabouts were you? Sorry.
So yeah, I've been in Farnborough for the last however many years of my life, so in and
Okay.
around that area. So yeah, straight down the M3.
Yes. And then when it comes to like signing with, it's a major record label. Like, what was that process like?
Long. um, there's so much sort of toing and froing with lawyers as they talk about things that I at the time would never understand. Um, but yeah, I mean, we signed to a guy called Blair McDonald, who was the MD of Columbia, and he's still. I literally spoke to him on Friday last week. You know, we still, catch up with each other and see how each other's doing and that kind of thing. And he's does my publishing and things like that. And he was just great. He was lovely. The team around us was really cool. It just took ages to actually finally sign. And I think by the time we did sign, we were kind of like, about time, because we just kind of wanted to get on with it. And we'd been talking about it for such a long time. It was like, is it this week? No. Is it this week? No. So we had that going on for far too long, I would imagine. But in fairness, you kind of have to get those things right. And major labels want to make sure everything is all the what was it, the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. But it was cool.
Yeah, did you get to that point? You said the process was a long time, but in terms of getting label interest, was that quite immediate almost type thing?
It was after I think it was the Kitty show that kind of started to get people interested. And Simon Williams put our first single out, and that was a very non-committal thing. It was just do EP1, couple of tracks, how it goes, generate a bit of interest. And Simon did an amazing job. Simon was like an amazing taste maker anyway. And from there, people were sort of starting to talk to us. But I think because we got played on the Radio 1 Rock show like before then, I think, and Radio 1 and Kerrang magazine essentially were kind of like behind us. I don't think that did us any harm either, because again, labels look out for that stuff. There's something to be said about, radio is still quite important. And if a record label doesn't have to fight a radio station to get you on it, then that's a good thing. And if it's Radio 1, then yeah, it's not a bad thing at all in their book. So I think it was like a culmination of things that sort of lead to that interest. And then I think we won Best New British Band at the Kerrang Awards as well before we'd signed our deal. It was like they're normally in August at Kerrang Awards, and we signed our deal like the following April or something. So we finished at the Kerrang Awards, got hideously drunk, and all went back to our day jobs the next day with massive hangovers. But a good time was had.
Yeah, yeah. And were you able to build a following quite quickly but organically type thing?
Well, yeah, I would argue that sort of back then, I don't think you could probably do it any other way, really.
Hmm.
Without, you didn't have social media back then where you could kind of put loads of stuff up and try and get people to buy into what you're doing and that kind of thing. You kind of go, right, I'm going to go and play some shows, and people like it, and then they tell their friends, and more people go to shows, and you keep doing it, keep doing it, and then we had a good manager at the time called Mark Pycroft, who was really good at just developing us, and really good at understanding. Like he's really like good at knowing when you've written a good song and telling you, and also really good at telling you when you have been a bit rubbish on stage that night. So we got good because we had the right people around us as well, supporting us, and no one was blowing smoke anywhere. So if you did a bad show, you'd be able to sit down and dissect it and understand why that show maybe couldn't have been as good. And we kind of learned that really early on in our career. And the idea was, we treated the band like a second job. So you went to your day job, and then you go and practice and write songs, and practice more and write more songs and play shows, and you just did that. And that was kind of like most of your evenings. And nobody had to make phone calls to say, "Oh, is the drummer going to be there tonight? I hope the drummer's going to be there." It's like, no, everyone just turned up. So there was kind of like a professional ethos that kind of went on as well with all of that. So it's just, again, I think I don't really think about it too much, but when I do think about it, I think, we were professional, we had a good team around us, and we were focused on what we were doing. So it's kind of almost, without sort of trying to sound big headed, it's kind of just the fact that, yeah, we got signed because we put the work in. And like you say, you build a fan base organically, because back then there wasn't much of anything else to be able to do that, or many ways to do that other than that. So, you know, you had no choice.
Yeah, yeah. And what job were you doing at that point, out of interest?
I was working in a video game shop.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I know. Love my video games. So yeah, I was working in a video game shop around the time of, it must have been like PlayStation 1 and N64 and Sega Saturn and things like that were around. They've been around for a bit. But yeah, that's when I was working in retail. But I enjoyed it. I liked my job. It's good fun.
Yeah, yeah. And there's obviously a point where you can stop working type thing, or stop having the day job. Do you remember that as a specific moment?
I do, because I kind of like finished working in retail, and I ended up having to essentially work in a BT call center for about 6 months, just to sort of bring the money in. And in fairness, I did take the piss out of that job, but the people there were really kind to me and actually surprisingly understanding when I go, "Can I just finish early tonight? Because I'm going to go and drive to Leeds and play a show, and I've just had something come up." And they go, "Yeah, all right." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool, thanks, bye." Um, so they were really cool about that. And then we kind of signed our record deal, and we weren't going to get our money for a couple of weeks. You don't get your money straight away normally when you sign a record deal. You have to wait. You have to do an invoice, and then that has to go through the system, and then you get your money. Um, but I literally just quit the next day. Just sort of walked into work and kind of just left. I don't even think I told anybody I was going. I just left. I don't need to be here now. I'm going. Just walked out. It's the only time I've ever done that. But I'd signed the deal, been out for sausage and mash the night before for a nice dinner, and then yeah, went into the call center and thought, I mean, I hated the job. You know, I always say hats off to anybody that works anywhere doing anything, because you know a lot of jobs are a means to an end for a lot of people. I don't know many people that might go, yeah, I want to go full career working in a call center. So, you know, there's people there that are just sort of trying to get by. And I hated it, even though the people around me were perfectly reasonable. It wasn't an issue really in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, just signed my deal, went to work the next day and thought, nah, and went home.
So
But
you
it
just
was an
didn't tell
agency.
anyone? You
Yeah.
didn't kind of ring them or anything?
No, just left. It was an agency.
Right, right. I know what you
So
mean, yeah.
so you worked for BT. It was an agency that was working for BT, and those are the people that weren't really treating you very well. But the people like in the offices that you were working with were quite nice, but they paid you terribly, obviously. Um, and you're just like, yeah, off I go.
And then recording with Dave Sardy, was that your idea or the record label's idea? How did it work?
Well, we all sat around Larry's flat in Putney at the time, and we just listened to loads of records, and we all bought our records with us that we really liked the sound of. Um, and we all liked this band called Far, who had an album called Water and Solutions. So that came out on Sony as well, actually. And we loved the sound and the production of that record. And we were just like, this is the guy that we would like to produce us. And our manager at the time was a guy called Tank, also managed Reef and A. I think he had an inroad to Dave Sardy's manager or something cool. Um, and we sort of ran it by the label. They didn't seem to have an issue with it. And Dave wanted to do it as well. So it happened, which was awesome. But I think it was Tank's connection that helped out with that. Absolutely, just knowing the right people. And I don't think Dave was ludicrously expensive for us, even though he'd done Marilyn Manson and Slayer and Jet. I think were after us, just after us, and he did these hardcore bands like Orange 9mm and Helmet and stuff like that that we really liked as well as Far. So we kind of picked him more for the hardcore stuff rather than necessarily, even though most of his records just sounded incredible. So yeah, we kind of went down that route, but we didn't have a backup producer. So I think we've been pretty screwed because we couldn't think of anybody else out of all the albums that we were listening to, you know, and it was albums that we loved musically and still did have good production. But it was like, this is the guy that suits us the most, we think. And if you ever have you ever listened to Water and Solutions by Far?
Don't think so, no.
Okay, the first song on the record, which I think is called Barry White, not Barry White, Barry as in you're buried, Barry White. And it literally just has this huge drop when all the instruments just come in together on a big kind of boom. And we were like, that's it right there. And then if you listen to Oratorio on our first record, you can see why.
Yes.
So
And
yeah,
like, did you record it in New York?
we did. Yeah, we went to New York for like 6 weeks in the summertime and had an amazing time meeting loads of amazing people. Bumped into so many cool people. I didn't go, but the guys all went to like Six Flags and hanging out with Taking Back Sunday. We used to love this band called Era Type 11, so we went to see them play. Went out and hung out with people like Chris Trainer, who was playing guitar and Helmet at the time. Um, just all these kind of cool bands and kind of things that were going on. It was really good fun. Yeah, no complaints at all. But the glue that held it all together was this engineer that was at the studio at Magic Shop, and there's a guy called Juan, and he was awesome, and he just knew everybody. And he'd be like, "Yeah, I've got these old shows of Texas is the Reason at CBGB's or something on VHS," and then we'd all be sitting around watching these bands that we loved and all that kind of thing. But he knew all these guys, all these people. So he was kind of this kind. We made contact with all those people just like because of that. Yeah, it was brilliant. It's awesome.
Yes. And how quickly were you playing abroad at that point?
We'd already been. So the first we signed our record deal in like April, I think it was in 2001, and then they sent us on tour around Europe with Incubus. Um, like we did some UK shows, finished the UK at Brixton Academy, went on a tour bus and woke up in France. And we were in Europe on our first European tour, supporting them, and it was amazing. It was so cool. Um, so we did that, and the idea was get the band out, get them on the road, get them playing their songs that they're going to record, get them playing them great, and getting ready to record before we did. And then we went to record in that summertime, um, and then just didn't stop playing shows for like a year or something stupid. So yeah, it was good. It was a great time.
Yeah. And I've got to ask for your take on like the indie bands that
Excuse me.
you call them at that point, like people like the Strokes and the Libertines. Did you have any interest in bands like that or not really?
I think the Strokes have got some really good songs. Um, I never really kind of went for the Libertines or anything like that. I didn't really just didn't connect with it. I mean, the thing for me is I'm kind of one of those live and let live people. I don't hate really very many people. There's only like one person I could say that I probably genuinely hate, or maybe two. But other than that, I'm fairly easygoing, and they don't have an impact on my life or my career or anything like that. And it's different fan bases, and I don't have to always necessarily agree with what they do or how they do it, or even like connect with their music. Um, so for me, I just didn't really think about them without sounding too negative. I was too busy doing my own thing with what I was doing and to worry about them. Um, and when you see them getting all the press and that, I mean, in fairness, I've just never been a fan of the music. But I can't say I've ever, off the top of my head, met the people in the bands to form a thought on how they are as people. But people do their own thing, and at the end of the day, bands do well because fans connect with what they're doing. And the Libertines were massive, and I don't have to get it. Not my job to get it, but a lot of other people did, quite happily. So it just doesn't. The music doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't make me feel anything. But again, that's just me, and somebody else absolutely loves it, and that kind of thing. And even like when you go back to like old Oasis, some of their music's like offensively amazing. It's so good, some of those old Oasis songs on the first two records. And I would argue that afterwards it kind of struggled, I think, to capture the magic. And I don't know the reasons behind that because, again, not in the band. But the first two records were just loads of amazing tunes on them. So yeah, I'm not for or against. I just think if a song is good and the band's good, I'm gonna like it, but I'm not gonna attach anything more than that to it.
No, I know what you mean. It's just whether you find it interesting or not, really. And it doesn't have to be. You don't have to be polarized about it.
No, I think so. I agree. I actually think sometimes, if music doesn't make you feel anything, that's probably one of my biggest insults I could give. I don't feel anything.
Hmm.
Oh, okay. And I'm not saying that always has to be an emotional thing either. Just be, but yeah, it's just I don't really I didn't put too much stock in too many of those indie bands around the time.
Yeah, yeah, fair play. And then, yeah, you mentioned the Kerrang Awards. Did you ever go to the NME Awards? Like, what was the comparison?
I did, and I think see this is the thing. I went to the NME Awards on a day off. So me and Andy Buse, I can't remember I think I can't remember whether we drove somewhere or flew somewhere. There was a flight involved, but essentially, like record labels, like it'd be good if you go to the NME Awards, and we're like, oh, it's a day off on tour, which you kind of when you're on tour a lot, and we were, you quite value those days off. So having to believe it or not go to the NME Awards was definitely more of a hindrance to our plans. But me and Andy Buse ended up going to the NME Awards, and we had to get a flight to Glasgow like the next day or afterwards. I can't. I think it was the next day because we had a show. Um, so we were kind of a sort of bit put out, but we saw the guys from Muse there, and we talked with Muse. So we hung out with them, and that was really nice. And we saw a few other people, but it's kind of one of those things where when you go to the Kerrang Awards, there's so many people there that because everybody knows who everybody is, even if you're not, or at least at the time, you weren't always necessarily, um, you know, you didn't know everybody like personally, but you knew who everybody was because everybody knew everybody. But when you went to the NME Awards, it just wasn't sort of like that. But yeah, we kind of went, showed our faces. I think we probably got a photo taken. And I think as NME supporters, it's a bit rude to sort of turn down an invite. So you go if you can. And then we sort of just got on a plane and went to Scotland to play a show. So yeah, um, yeah, that was it really. I just have vague recollections.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose, like, stereotypically, you'd expect the Kerrang Awards to be a bit more mental. I don't know why, but maybe not.
We definitely had a good time at the Kerrang Awards when we went. We had a very, very, very good time. Um, and again, there was a real sort of camaraderie, and I think also around sort of the UK rock scene at the time. There are lots of bands doing really well that were really good. So everybody was just really happy for each other, and there was, good times all round. So whenever you got that chance to kind of be together and hang out, you just did, and it was always loads of fun.
Yeah, yeah. Was it similar with festivals? Like, you'd have somewhere, yeah, you'd know a lot more people than others type thing. Because I guess I remember, like, Leeds
Yeah,
Festival, it was quite segmented on it. They'd have, like, the lock-up stage with more heavier bands type thing.
I think back in the days we were doing it, Reading was just more, and Leeds was more of a rock festival anyway.
Hmm.
And I'm not against, I always get annoyed when people go, oh, the Reading and Leeds lineup this year is rubbish. It's like, well, is it really? Are you going every year? I'm not these days. It's not really for me. If I want to go to a festival, I'll probably go to Download or something because that's a little bit more to my taste. Whereas Reading and Leeds is something that I think sort of musically kind of moves with the times, maybe a little bit more. Um, so I can understand why it's a bit segmented in some cases, but back in the early 2000s when we were doing it, it was just kind of pretty much, it was kind of like you had like the rock day, but it just ended up being a day where there were heavier bands than would be on the other days, but you'd still have rock bands on the other days. Um, so yeah, but the festivals were great. You'd always kind of meet people. I always remember watching Dillinger Escape Plan from the side of the stage with Brandon Boyd from Incubus, and the singer and Dillinger Escape Plan did something on the main stage, which was a lot of people were like, that's pretty disgusting. And Brandon was like, and I was like, yeah, that's Dillinger. But you kind of had those types of moments. And you bump into bands that you wouldn't normally see or have the chance to meet as well, which is always really cool. I remember sort of I went and did a festival in Germany and you're hanging out with people like Korn and stuff like that. And everyone's just chilling because it's not like a huge festival like maybe you get in the UK. It's a little bit smaller, a little bit quieter. Excuse me, I'm a bit ill today. Um, so you'd be sitting there chatting with those types of people and stuff, and it's nice. But you wouldn't, festivals are a good time to kind of see bands you don't normally see and see people that you don't normally see and meet people that maybe you just haven't had a chance to meet before, which is great.
Yeah. And I don't think I've spoken to anyone that's played at Ozfest before. Was that like different in any way? Noticeable type thing?
I have to remember now. So this is how strange things can be when you're kind of in a band, because we did a festival in Spain the day before, and then we got up at like 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. or something daft to get to the airport to actually fly back to England to then get on a bus to get to Ozfest, I think. So we did have a good time. We had a great set. We bumped into Kitty again, which was really nice, and they remembered us and said hello, which was absolutely wonderful and sweet. And then we did the show, and it was one of the best things ever. It was really cool. And we hung out a little bit because we did. I remember meeting the singer from Alter Bridge very briefly, I think, and he seemed quite nice. So you do all those kinds of things. Um, but then we did like Ozfest and Download a couple of times back in the day, and I think Ozfest was the one where we did that. Um, but yeah, it was just a long day rather than sitting there thinking, oh, we're soaking up the atmosphere and all that. It was, yeah, literally we got on a plane from Spain and went to London and then drove to the festival to play the show. And we were there on time and everything was great. We had a wonderful time and a great show. I definitely remember having a great show. But other than that, some of that stuff's a bit of a blur. You can remember what you did, but you don't always remember those kind of smaller details around that. And then you kind of do interviews when you're there as well. So I don't recall seeing many, if any, bands. The next time I went though was when bands like Meshuggah played and Sixth and all of that stuff, and you go and watch them and have a really good time, and you had the time to actually go and watch artists and watch bands play. But other times you're flying in, you do what you have to do, and then you leave. So sounds rock and roll, but it's a little bit. Oh, I wish I could have stayed.
Is Download the one you'd have gone to as a fan if you were in a band type thing?
Yeah, I did. I went to Monsters of Rock and stuff back in the day. I remember seeing like Pantera and Sepultura and Biohazard and Head Swim and all those types of bands. I think the one year I went was like Aerosmith was headlining, um, and it was a good time. So yeah, I wasn't really like the biggest festival goer, but I'd probably go to like pretty much every show I possibly could. Because I was more into going to the show rather than wandering around all day. At a festival. We used to go to festivals and going for a Fezzy wander, which is literally just obviously going to see what's going on. But we do that, and yeah. But other than that, I didn't do many festivals growing up. I would just be at the shows. So although I would see Pantera at a festival, I would have gone to see them headline. I would have gone to see Sepultura headline. Would have gone to see Biohazard headline. I would have just gone to the shows instead, rather.
Yeah. And then in terms of playing elsewhere, like how well did he go down in America and stuff like that?
We didn't play hardly any shows in America. We only did South by Southwest, I think, and that was about it. It's kind of one of those weird things when we kind of realised that the label initially were going to support us and get us over to America, and then there was a kind of changing of the guard, if you will, at Columbia when new people were coming in, and we just sort of weren't high priority anymore. So those plans just kind of essentially sort of didn't happen. So we went to the States to record, played South by Southwest, but we didn't actually tour America. Would have liked to, definitely would have liked to, but it just never sort of happened to us. We went all around Europe, went to Japan a bunch of times and things like that. So we got to travel about in a good way, but yeah, just never really toured America, which was a bit of a kind of like would have been nice to do, I think.
Yeah. But I mean, I think I saw you talking recently about playing Top of the Pops. Is that right?
We did. We did Top of the Pops a couple of times. Again, we did one on a day off, and it was rubbish. It was rubbish. That we played Hall for Cornwall the day before and had an amazing time down there. And then it was like, you got to do Top of the Pops. Top of the Pops has come up. We're like, really? We're like, yeah. And we're going to do it fully live. And we're like, oh, we kind of really are tired. And it definitely showed, I think, that we needed the day off. Um, so yeah, we did it. It's kind of one of those things though, where back in the day you'd say that you played Top of the Pops, and people were like, wow. So it was kind of like one of those things. It was a kind of I'm glad we did it, but I would have liked to have done it when I kind of wasn't absolutely shattered, which is what we were at the time. I think we did it again. I remember that. I think. and we sort of, Papa Roach were there and stuff. We played shows with them, so that was nice, and we kind of hung out with them for a bit, which was a bit different doing it in that sort of environment. But yeah, it was cool to do. But yeah, it's just kind of again. I'll tell you what I do. My friend Omar, I'm still friends with now. He worked at the BBC at the time, and he did take us to the Blue Peter Garden, which was a lot smaller than I expected. And he also took us to like a storage warehouse, and it's like there's the TARDIS and Doctor Who. We're like, oh, okay, cool. Just in case anybody actually cares, if you step inside, it's all special effects. But it was good to kind of see that. So that was a bit of a novelty thing. But that was more of our day at the BBC, which happened to have Top of the Pops on going on.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Playing live's pretty good though. Like, not everyone gets to do that, I guess. On top of the
No,
pops.
but also they're not sort of built for it. So it's kind of like one of those probably shouldn't do it, really.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's just not made for a live mix. Um, so yeah, it wasn't it could have been good. It should have been good. It wasn't good.
It's a bit of a rent-a-car thing as well, rather than
But it's just like,
fans.
yeah, it's more like, people apply for tickets for Top of the Pops and you go and you don't know what you're gonna get. So, you know, it's just kind of one of those things, really. You go there, you don't know what the crowd's going to be like. They're told to cheer and they're told to clap and all that anyway. It's just like, like you would imagine it to be. But the thing is, we didn't we didn't care about that. We never cared about that. We played in front of crowds before that didn't care. So we certainly weren't phased by anything like that at all. If anything, we thought it might be a good opportunity to maybe, get in some people's faces and stir it up a little bit. But yeah, we certainly weren't worried about the rent a crowd type thing. In fact, it's expected. You kind of know what you're getting into when you go on Top of the Pop. So yeah, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, yeah. Did you play many TV shows?
Remember doing one in Wales. Can't remember what it was called though. Excuse me. We did a few, but again, I think Top of the Pops was like the main ones, and some of the others I don't really recall. We did like Maida Vale sessions and lots of sort of XFM sessions and things like that, but we didn't do loads of TV. But yeah, just when you did it. But I can't remember much other than Top of the Pops. I know we did some more, but I don't even know if those programs are around anymore. And if they were, they didn't have the significance of Top of the Pops. So I just know we did a few.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was noticing you did like Steve Lamacq sessions and all sorts. Were Radio One pretty supportive type thing?
Yeah, they're amazing. They're really cool. So yeah, the rock show got behind us and stuff, which is really cool. Um, so yeah, again, like no complaints really. We were having a really good time. You just hanging out, having fun, doing what you wanted to do. The whole kind of thing was, what do you want to do with your life? I want to make music and play it live. You can do that. Someone's going to pay for you to do that and give you money. All right. You know, um, so, we weren't sort of in it for any other reason really, other than to just kind of, yeah, have fun and write the best music you can and play it the best you can. And that's what we did for a while, which was great.
Yeah, and it felt like, yeah, well, it looks like it had a lot of momentum going into the second album. Was everyone quite happy with you at that point, type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, we recorded it again in New York and we went down to Cornwall. We did a couple of different stints at some different studios that you could live in. And kind of went down there for a while. I think altogether we maybe spent about 2 or 3 months down there writing, which was really nice and chilled and really cool. Um, I think the second record came out well. It was a little bit more sedate, I think, than the first record. But again, by then, when we were recording it, we were already getting the inkling that things were changing at the label, and we weren't really going to probably be doing anything else with Sony after this one. They kind of did the second record because they had to, as in they were going to do it quite happily. But then, whilst things were changing, whilst we were recording, we knew that it was going to be a little bit different and things were going to change. And we knew that because we got offered a tour, I think, around the US with Newfound Glory and Good Charlotte. And they kind of said no. And at the time, those bands were doing 10 to 15,000 people a night, which is, you get offered a tour like that, you should probably take it and your label should spend money on letting you do that. Because they said no, we were like, oh, I see. So we kind of already had a bit of an inkling.
Right. In terms of the songwriting, do you say you were doing that just beforehand type thing? Well, how would that work for the second album?
Yeah, so we just you finish touring. We did the odd show here and there. Um, we went and did a show in Canberra Sands because sadly, Glassjaw couldn't play. So I know Daryl in Glassjaw has Crohn's disease and he had some challenges at the time, so they couldn't play the show. So they kind of called us up as like a Kerrang weekend type thing. We went and did that, and we were writing at the time, and we thought, yeah, let's go and play a show, and that'd be fun. And it was a good time. It was just a shame. I mean, I love Glassjaw; they're like an amazing band. But so we went and did that. But yeah, I think we spent about 3 months writing, and then when you finish writing, it's time to go and record. And so we did.
Yeah, did you feel any extra pressure at that point? Or not really, or things just going well, so you enjoying songwriting at that point?
I think it was because we were at the studio all the time. It was a little bit more difficult, I think, to sort of make the magic happen. Um, it did, but it was a little bit sort of rarer, I think. Um, and it was kind of almost like living at the studio. I think we came a little bit kind of, I think we took it for granted maybe a little bit. So, when you're kind of like when we were writing and rehearsing mainly in sort of London, sort of Putney and Kingston and that, that was the only time you had that day. So you better go and make good use of your time. But when you got 24-hour access to a studio to just go and lay stuff down and try ideas out at any particular time, it just became a little bit more relaxed. And maybe that's kind of the Cornish vibe as well, because it's very relaxed down there anyway. So I think that maybe had a bit of an impact on the mood of the record. So it's a little bit more. I think tempo wise, some of the songs were a little bit more sort of laid back. There was still heaviness on the record, but it wasn't, the same as the first album. But then it shouldn't be either, in fairness. And you should just write the best music you can at that time, which is what we did. So I don't think we really felt too much pressure. I think as long as we were happy with the songs, which we were, apart from one, from my perspective, um, then it was good to go.
Yeah, and I'm right thinking in terms of labels, you basically swapped one major label for another type thing.
Well, again, like Tank, our manager at the time, did an amazing job of steering this and making it quite seamless. So, I mean, I think he knew what was, we knew the lay of the land because Tank was open with us, but Tank was really working behind the scenes. So when we did actually leave Sony, we were in a really strong position to be able to just essentially sign another record deal very quickly. And that was with V2, um, which later got absorbed by Universal. So they were an independent label at the time. But we literally, we just went and kind of did that. So it was quite seamless. And again, that was just Tank doing a great job in the management department of, just literally, just looking after that, making sure that everything was cool. And when we left one, we went to the other. And but I think, I think we lost a little bit of momentum in that. But the album that we came back with, I think, was at the time, it's probably my favorite 100 Reasons record, Kill Your Own. Because again, I think we kind of had the fire back a bit more. And it was, it was just a great record. And again, because we weren't going away to write stuff. We were literally like, again, back in the rehearsal rooms and stuff. So I think the energy was there again, which was cool.
Yeah, was that at the point where was it more self-produced or the guitarist Larry was
Yeah.
producing it? Is that right?
Yeah. Larry produced it. And he did a really good job. So genuinely couldn't complain really. We did a great job. Um, I think also as well, we'd all grown in experience. So when you first go in and record an album or something, it's a little bit rabbit in the headlights. By the time you get into your third record, you kind of know what you need to do and how to do it. And, hopefully that made Larry's job easier. We definitely, I think, not on this record, but the record after, we rowed quite a lot more on that one. But I think, again, that was more because things weren't really good in the band. Because between like the third and fourth record, Paul left because he just didn't really want to do it anymore. And in fairness, I couldn't really blame him. We were kind of, not really playing the big shows, and it's not about playing the big shows necessarily, but just like you kind of feel like this is something that's had its day. At least at the time, it felt like that, and I think Paul realised it possibly before everybody else did. But Kill Your Own was, I'm really proud of that record, and Larry did a great job producing it. And yeah, again, I think there's only one song on that I actually still do genuinely like the song, but it probably didn't turn out as well as I wanted it to. But other than that, that record to me is brilliant.
Is that because I read something that Larry added an instrument that he didn't like on it? Or was that a different song?
Um, it might be a different song. I mean, to be fair, I mean, I know we kind of had a song on our first record called "What Larry Did." It was called "What Thought Did," but we called it "What Larry Did." And I think it's because he played the guitar differently to the way we all envisaged it when we were writing it. Um, but Dave was like, "Do it that way. Try it that way. You got to do it that way. It's going to be better." But all of us were like, "Oh," and we love the song, and it's great fun to play. And it's a joke because we love the song, and it's not a big deal. But we used to call it "What Larry Did." Um, and then I put an instrument on something. You might have put an instrument on something, and we maybe didn't agree on something or whatever. But I think that everything sort of turned out pretty well on that third record. It was just a song that I just felt that was really good when we were writing it, but just didn't really kind of come out as well recorded as I hoped it would. It's
Which one was that then? Sorry.
called Destroy, which has
Okay.
some great parts, and it's a good song, but I don't know, it just didn't seem to come out like the way I wanted it to. But that's not to say that I had a better answer, by the way, just so you're well aware. I'm not sitting there thinking, oh, I would have done that and I would have done this. It just didn't seem to come together when we recorded it for some strange reason, as well as I would have, I don't know, would have liked.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose I didn't actually ask you how you met each other in the band. Skipped over
Well,
that really.
we all met at our local nightclub, the Agincourt. So
In
we had
Farnborough.
like, well, Camberley technically,
All
it's
right.
like the next town along, but we always used to go to the Agincourt on a Saturday night and just all hang out and listen to mainly indie music, funny enough. But we'd all go there. Um, and we all kind of knew each other a little bit, but we weren't like in a band. I was in a band, like I said, called Floor to start with. And we had a drummer and a guitar player and a bass player and me. So we're like a four piece. And the bass player, the guitar player and the drummer decided to quit. So me and the bass player carried on, and a couple of, we found a guitar player. We found an extra guitar player who had a brother that played drums, which was Paul's brother. And then things with Paul's brother weren't really gelling in terms of what's going on with the songs and stuff. So we ended up getting Andy Buse in, and then the bass player became very good at kind of posing on stage rather than actually sort of doing what he should be doing. So personality wise, it became a bit of a clash, and so he left, and then the Andy ended up playing bass, and then we were being managed at the time by a guy called Mark Pycroft who co-managed us with Tank essentially. Mark and Jane co-managed us with Tank, and essentially they were looking after a band called Jetpack that Lyra was in, and Jetpack were falling apart for whatever reason. And then Mark just went, well, why don't you let Larry come and just go and have a jam with Larry? And we did. And I'm pretty sure we wrote Cerebra in that first session. And it was awesome. And we're like, oh, that's the band then. And then we kind of found our name and then went from there, really. But we'd all been
Yeah.
playing in different bands and doing different things like locally for a while. But I think it's sort of when we all sort of sat for Larry and it all just gelled. And there was a real kind of, this is great. This is what we want to be doing. This is good.
Right, yeah, and then skipping back to Larry producing the third album, with the record label quite happy with that kind of thing?
Yeah, probably because he was cheap. But Larry had been doing like, I can't remember. I think he can't remember what he did. I think there's a few bands that he did. I think he did a band called Your Code Name Is Milo, I think, and a few others. So
Okay.
And when we were writing the second record, he was really getting into Pro Tools and stuff. We bought a Pro Tools rig, and he was just really good at getting to know that stuff. I mean, he produces now. It's what he is. He's a producer, but he was just trying things out and producing other people. So he was in a position to be able to confidently produce us and do a good job. So it wasn't like, hey, Larry, you've never produced anyone before. Can you just sort us out to save some money? But no, he was great. But then we went to America, or I didn't, Larry did, and Dave Sardi mixed a couple of the tracks that were on the record. So he still had some involvement. And yeah, it's good.
And then I'm right in thinking you went to Latvia to record the fourth album. Like, what took you over there?
Like really, really good studio, like amazing studio that didn't cost a lot of money. So we went over there, but I don't think this is where it kind of went a little bit south, I think, because we weren't really ready to go and record, but we kind of had to. So I don't know if the label wanted to carry on. And again, I think Tank fought our corner and we ended up making a fourth record, but we weren't ready to record. And I remember sitting in a tour bus in Nottingham or something thinking, we're just not ready. We've got half a record here. When we went to Latvia, we went and we just spent a week writing, managed to get some more songs together. They were pretty decent, pretty good, and we recorded it. But it wasn't like the best time because, again, we were kind of feeling, I think, as though, this might be the last record we do for a while. And I think we were kind of just not really feeling it, and again, I think the Larry was producing again, and I think that, I think I could have been kinder to Larry at times as well because it was a difficult position for him to be in. There was a lot of pressure on him. Like we say, the songs I don't think were, in hindsight, they're actually very good songs, but they just didn't feel very 100 Reasons. So, and it didn't sort of feel very natural. There's a lot more when I sort of go back to what we spoke about earlier, where the songs felt a little bit forced. It was hard work to get the songs to the state they were in. And again, we were kind of, even when we were doing some of the writing, we had a guitar player called Ben Doyle who took over from Paul, and he was amazing, lovely bloke. We go to his house and write and things like that. But again, it wasn't sort of sitting in a room just feeling the energy. So it was a little bit, again, a lot like hard work. And I'll be fair, I was personally definitely lacking motivation. So you kind of went and did it, and you kind of did it because that's what you do. But it was, there were some songs on there that were really meaningful though, definitely. So I'm not selling the album short lyrically or musically, just the headspace we were in at the time, had some sort of personal tragedy going on around the band as well, with a few people that we were very close to that had passed away in different circumstances and things. So it was like writing about things that were really quite like very, very personal, but not in a situation where you'd really maybe want to do that. So it was odd, it was a bit odd. So I can listen to the record now and it's cool and there's some great stuff on it, but sort of back in the time of doing it, I think we just felt a little bit fractious and a little bit, what are we doing now? What are we doing? Just feel like you're sort of flogging a dead horse a little bit.
Yeah, did that lead into a bit of a hiatus, was it, from 2009? I was reading.
Something daft like that, yeah. Yeah, I guess so, yeah. I mean, again, when we went out and played shows, because we still did tour to support the record, it was great fun. And it was really good because we always did enjoy playing live. That's never changed. And it was always great fun. But the thing for me is I've always kind of wanted to be, even though, art doesn't have to be perfect, but I just wanted to be 100% behind something that I'd done. It was probably the first time in my career where I'd, done a record where I just felt, regardless of what anyone else felt or feels or says or anything like that, personally just felt as though it was a little bit all right, rather than something I can, shout from the rooftops. This is great. I'm really proud of this. And, and you have to go and sell that in a interview and you go, yeah, it's a great record. It's awesome. You just feel a little bit empty when you're kind of doing stuff like that. So yeah, it's tough. A bit weird.
But then, even though you didn't release an album for a long time, you're still playing shows kind of intermittently, kind of thing, during those years.
Well, yeah, but very intermittently. And it was something that we felt whenever we did something, it kind of had to be a good thing to do. So the hiatus thing wasn't sort of, something that we'd necessarily band on purpose, but we just didn't really have sort of the inclination to kind of be together. And because essentially we weren't earning enough money, to be honest, to sort of pay mortgages and things, we all had to go off and do different stuff. So again, so that again sort of takes it back down to sort of almost like a part-time thing. And then when you've got families around you and stuff, and you can't just say to the wife, I'm off on tour for 2 months now, I'm going to come back with nothing, and I'll probably lose the job I've got or whatever. The job is good or whatever. It's like it's not a strong look. And that's not, me being negative about anything. It's just that I'm quite a realistic person, and I've never kind of, at least I don't think I've ever had my head in the clouds when it comes to stuff like this. I've had a great chance to do something absolutely amazing and had a brilliant time, but I didn't think it was going to last forever anyway. And if things aren't working out and you're not feeling inclined to go and, be together to write and do that kind of thing, then, there's no point again in sort of forcing it. So it took a while. And then there was the opportunity, like we did the 10th year anniversary and stuff of Ideas in 2012, which was amazing, really good time. And then again, there was no real reason to kind of do anything again. And then we did Sonosphere in 2014 because Lowe got drunk with Alan Day in a bar and said, "You're going to put us on Sonosphere?" And Alan was like, "Yeah, if you want." And he was like, "Okay." So we did that. And that was a great day. That was really cool. And then that was it until we started talking about sort of playing shows again. Yeah, that was it for a while.
And when you say other things, were you able to like carry on working in music, or was it just unrelated stuff?
So I did like music licensing and stuff. I worked on Guitar Hero and DJ Hero,
Oh, yes.
and stuff like that. And then I kind of got into teaching at music schools and things with a few other things in between. So I've always been around it. I did a side project called They Fell from the Sky, which is really cool, with a guy called Jason Bold who plays in Bullet for My Valentine. And Dave Draper, who's a really good friend of mine, kind of recorded it, mixed it, mastered it, played guitar. And we did that, and that was really cool. So I've always had like a creative outlet. I've never kind of stopped being creative. It was just a situation with HR for a while was just, just not. It wasn't like I'm sitting thinking I don't want to. It wasn't that. It was more just like not, it's just not like my life anymore. And I think Larry felt the same for a while, for sure, definitely. Um, so if that's not happening, then it's just not happening. And again, it was no like love lost or anything. There was no big fallout or big rows or anything like that in any shape or form. It was just not doing stuff. Very
Yeah.
unrock and roll. Very unrock and roll.
So with the Guitar Hero stuff, were you like picking the songs to go on it type thing?
Yeah. So helping, by the way. So there was a whole sort of music team as well, full of amazing human beings. Met so many good people in that music team. People like Brandon Young. I think it was and Sergio Pimentel, who works in Sync now, and people like that. Mike Fegley. Just these cool people, just really lovely people, and it was a good time. So yeah, you're all just working on licensing and listening to good music every day to find the next songs and seeing if you can get permission to use it and all that. It was a good time indeed.
Yes. And then just wanted to go back to questions. Got one on Patreon from Moose, who yeah, just a bit of comparison with the indie scene. He says, be interesting to know if they and the other bands around like Ruben and Hell is for Heroes got any label pressure to be more like the indie landfill bands.
I would say I don't think so. I think there were. I like the way they go indie landfill. I've heard that phrase before. Um, I'm kind of like, now this doesn't necessarily mean it's true, but I heard that Hell is for Heroes ended their time, I think, with EMI because of Robbie Williams. And it was to do with Robbie Williams signing an £80 million deal, and EMI had to find the money from somewhere. And you could argue that they probably should have continued to have supported Hell is for Heroes to keep making records, but I think they may have. I don't know. I just heard that. That doesn't make it true, by the way. But they had to find the money. So although it's not Robbie Williams' fault, I don't think Robbie Williams walked in and went, "Get rid of Hell is for Heroes." I think that when he was doing that deal for 80 million quid or whatever it was, they had to find the money from somewhere. And I think artists got cut back. But I certainly didn't feel any pressure. I don't think anybody felt any pressure. Um, I'm kind of like, it's like some people do. They all say this about some to major labels. Like, oh, they're going to try and change you. So probably not. And the reason they're probably not going to do that is because what's the point in signing you? They should probably go and sign what they actually want to sign, because then there's going to be less kickback. Trying to turn a metal band into an indie band is going to take a lot of effort. Just sign an indie band, you know. So no, I don't think there was any real pressure. I mean, if you listen to Hell is Your Heroes or you see Ruben play, nobody I think was sitting there thinking, "Oh, I must be more indie." Um, Again, they're just writing great music.
Yeah, yeah. And it felt like in that indie scene with NME and stuff, bands kind of almost became uncool to a degree at some point in like the late 2000s. Was it not like that in kind of like the scene you were in? It was a bit more consistent type thing.
I don't think we ever tried to be cool.
No, no.
I don't think I ever tried to be cool. I think I just, again, I don't think Headers for Heroes ever tried to be cool. They were cool. I don't think they tried to be cool. I think people just went out and wrote great music and played great shows, and that's what was important. And we played shows, we toured with Headers for Heroes a lot. So you really do get the measure of people, and they're just nice, and they just play great shows every time you go and see them. They're just brilliant, and they're doing it because they have a great time, rather than sort of anything else.
Yeah, I guess it's different in that. I guess you get people at NME doing something like the coolest. It's not like something that Kerrang would necessarily do, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, who was it? There's a oh, I can't remember the name of the band now. I might have to look it up real quick. They had an album called Through Being Cool. Um, but it's like it wasn't the movie life or something. No, I'll know that. I'll finish this, and then I'll remember who it is. Saves the day, I think it is. Um, but there was just no need for it. There's no need for egos. Everyone got along. People just, like I say, just played great music and wrote great music, and it was just a good time. And yeah, I don't think enemy really. No one was really paying attention. I don't think anybody was. I don't think anybody was necessarily trying to get into NME. And like I said, I'm grateful for the support. And even when we got the last record out in 2023, they'd been supportive and really good. So I've got no issue or anything. But I don't think we were sort of going out of our way either.
Yeah, yeah. And then talking about NME, like finding like random stories on their archive, and found one about your gig from Ulu in 2003 where it got stopped for a fire alarm, had to be rescheduled because a fire alarm wouldn't stop going off or something. Does that ring any
Yeah, that
bells?
rings about.
Pardon the
That's no
pun.
pun intended. Yeah, no, right. Um, yeah, yeah, we did a show. I think we did two shows at the Ulu. And yeah, we had to reschedule one because yeah, that's what happened. So we had a fire alarm go off once at the QMU in Glasgow, and this is a little bit more. I think this is cooler, by the way, just so you're well aware, because we didn't cancel the show. It went off during our show actually happening, and we had a natural gap in a song we wrote called "Kill Your Own," and it stops. And then we heard the fire alarm. Everybody left the building. Fire brigade comes out, checks it all, false alarm, it's all safe. Everybody goes back in, and then we just literally start the song up after the gap and carry on the set. And I thought that was cool. So yeah, you get those little funny little things that happen. And we were just like talking about it outside. Should we just come in after the gap? We're like, yeah, let's do that. So it's almost like you have your break, and then went on and did that. So yeah, but the Yuli thing, yeah, there was definitely something to do with a fire alarm at some point, and we were in the venue, I think, ready to play, and then we all had to go home.
Nice. And Moose again on Patreon said was like a maddest promo gig that you did around that time. A lot of corporate gigs being offered around that time, I think.
Um, I don't think we did anything corporate off the top of my head. I think the only thing we did that was vaguely corporate was there was like the School of Rock movie came out, and we played the after party, but we got to go to the premiere and hang out with Jack Black and all of that lot, and have a nice time and a good evening. We just happened to play like four songs. Um, and we got like nice free guitars and stuff and everything out of Gibson. I think that's probably the most corporate thing we ever did, but we certainly didn't do anything else like that. Um, to be fair, I think a lot of the time it wasn't really kind of our thing. Um, so I don't even recall turning anything down though, in fairness either. But if we did get offered anything, I don't think we did it. And I don't think we were kind of for it. So maybe we just said to the management beforehand, we're just not really into that corporate thing. It's always a bit weird and a bit stale. And we did a few charity things. I think we did a charity thing with, I think it was called War on One with Snow Patrol actually. And that was worth doing. I think it was that. So we did a few things like that that were not corporate, but something that was a little bit more sort of cause orientated. And we did Surfers Against Sewage and things like that. So that was probably about as corporate as it got, because ideally what we wanted to do is, you want to try and do something that you feel is hopefully going to make a little bit of a difference rather than just sit in a room or play in a room full of, po-faced people that don't really care and have paid you too much money to be there anyway. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then briefly mentioned it, but what was the catalyst to doing the latest album type thing?
I think just because we had some shows coming up and we decided to get together. And it was me, the Andy and Larry. I think the Andy and Larry kind of, because I have a day job, so I just finished work and then went over to Larry's studio and they'd come up with some ideas. And then I bounced off those ideas and we basically had a song called Right There With You. It's on the last record. And that was written like that night. Not everything entirely, obviously, but there's the song. And we all came away feeling amazing. And we're like, that was really good. That was really easy. And maybe when you go back and look on things before, maybe it was just a combination of things like pressure and, and everything's got to be right and all that. But there was no pressure in the room. It was just nice to see you. We talked a few times, obviously, beforehand to arrange going to hang out. And it was just so easy. And then we were like, we should do some more of this. And we did. And every time we got together, or we were writing like 2 songs each session pretty much. And it'd be around till hours, like maybe a couple of times a week or something. We wrote a lot. And like I said, Andy Buse, even though he didn't sort of come to one session because he couldn't, but he would send song ideas that turned into songs. It was really good, really productive, and just really easy. So that album just came about great.
Yes, and then leading into this gig at the Albert Hall, um, I heard you say it's like a bucket list thing. But how do you even come about playing the Albert Hall? How does that work?
Well, someone puts an idea to you and says it's a good idea, and you go, do you know what? I think that is a good idea. So you want to go and do it, and it's 25 years of the band. Um, we want to do something a bit special and a bit different. Um, and the thing for us is if we ever do something, it's something that we kind of feel is cool to do. And we couldn't really sort of imagine sort of there being sort of anything else, really. We're not going to get asked to headline Download. We're not going to headline a stadium or something like that. And that's not me being like sulky or anything, because I'm not, but I'm also, like I said, a bit of a realist. So I don't really sort of see there being anything else really for us to do. And also, when we wrote the last record, and I said this to the guys, and I didn't mean it in a negative way, and I still feel this way now. I don't feel the need to be creative with 100 Reasons, not in a bad way at all, but I just don't have that sort of inclination. I think I let so much of myself out in the last record that I felt as though, I've definitely spent a lot, if that makes sense. And I don't think I've sort of built up a reserve of things to say again for that band. So the whole Albert Hall thing was kind of like just a good way, I think, of kind of bookending things. It's 25 years. We had a great record out in 2023. We'll do some stuff with some strings, which is cool and different for us. And kind of leave on a good point, I think. So I think
Yeah,
that's kind of the thing behind it.
yeah, yeah. And when you say it's your last ever headlining show, does that mean you still be playing festivals and stuff like that?
First thing, I don't know. I think it's very difficult logistically for us to get together as a band and do these things. Some of us are more flexible than others, but the core four of us, which it is now, with Jack from Mama's actually plays session guitar very, very well. But Andy Buse, he's off tour, and I think he's working with Kylie Minogue at the moment. And he does things like that, which take up a lot of his time. And when he's actually going out and touring, his like schedule for next year is already being booked in. This is something that people don't necessarily always understand, that when you're sort of trying to put shows on, that they have to be planned and not even announced necessarily, but planned a long, long time in advance. So even when we're like sitting there thinking, oh, it'd be good to do this, we might try and do that. What about that festival? About that festival? It's very difficult because Andy's already kind of got his work laid out. So we just find it difficult to kind of be together. So again, it's kind of one of those things where you don't ever want to say never when it comes to festivals and stuff, because certain festivals like Download and 2000 Trees have been absolutely incredible and amazing. And we love the people that run those things. They're very good people. But it's just in terms of sort of trying to get together logistically to kind of put a show on. And after the Albert Hall, I'm not really sure we kind of see the point in trying to do another headlining show. It's kind of I don't know. It's not something I've really sort of spent much time sort of talking about. We've kind of made the decision to do it, and we're all cool with it. But it's just something that we haven't really sort of said out loud. But there we go.
No, it's just an amazing way to semi go out, if you like, anyway.
Well, I think that's the idea, because we've all got families, we've got other commitments, we've got things going on, and our fans have always been amazing anyway. I've never met a fan that I like didn't like or anything. Everyone's always been cool. Everyone's always been nice. And I think, like we say, you just kind of want to try and go and do something that's a little bit special in a place that is different. And obviously got rival schools as well, who are awesome. So yeah, let's go and do that. And then if anything else, festival wise, comes our way, I just don't know. But I can honestly say, hand on heart, talking to you right now, there's genuinely nothing else even being talked about.
Yeah, yeah, fair play. Have you played gigs before thinking it's going to be the last type thing?
No, not really, because we've always kind of left things a little bit sort of open ended anyway. We've never said it, even though when we did gigs in 2012, people are like, oh, it's your farewell gigs. And we never said that. At least I don't think I did. I never did. So it's always been kind of open ended a little bit. But I think it's a nice thing to do. I quite like, you don't want to be like that TV show that just keeps on going and going and going, and then you go, oh, we're on season 7 now and it's all a bit rubbish. You sit there and think, finish on season 4 or whatever, and have a finite end and draw that line in the sand.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
I
well, cheers
like
for your
it.
time. Yeah, yeah,
That's all
no,
right,
I
Harry.
agree.
No worries.
Just finish on 2 questions I asked people. Is there a highlight of those early days, and is there anything you do differently, type thing?
Highlight of those early days was first tour around Europe with Incubus. Lovely people, lovely crew, so much fun. And what was the other question?
Anything you do differently?
I wouldn't have released The Great Test as the first single back on the second record. I think I would have fought more to say no.
Fair play. All right, cheers, Colin.
Thanks, Harry. Take care. Bye bye.